The autumn rain pelted against the second-story window of the Thompson apartment, creating rivulets that distorted the streetlights below into dancing yellow blurs. 3-year-old Lily Thompson should have been fast asleep in her princess-themed bedroom, but the thunderous sound of car doors, slamming and urgent voices had pulled her from her dreams. Her tiny bare feet padded across the cold hardwood floor as she made her way to the living room window, her favorite stuffed elephant clutched tightly against her chest. What she saw below would haunt her innocent mind for months to come. Her daddy, Robert Thompson, was standing beside his silver Honda Civic in the apartment complex parking lot, his hands raised high above his head. The flashing red and blue lights from 3 police cars painted the entire scene in an eerie, pulsating glow that made everything look like a scary movie. Lily pressed her small face against the cold glass, her breath fogging the window as she tried to understand why the police were being so mean to her daddy. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. She wanted to run downstairs, to tell the police officers that they were making a big mistake. Her daddy was good. He made her pancakes every Saturday morning, read her bedtime stories, and taught her to tie her shoes. He wasn't a bad man, like the ones she saw on Mommy's television shows. Officer Kane stepped forward from the group of uniformed men, his imposing figure casting a long shadow under the harsh streetlights. Even from her second-story perch, Lily could see the mean look on his face. His partner, Officer Davis, stood nervously to the side, constantly checking his watch and glancing around as if he wanted to be anywhere else. The third officer remained by his patrol car, one hand resting on the leash of a large German shepherd that paced back and forth, its dark eyes fixed on Robert. "Step away from the vehicle, Mr. Thompson." Kane's voice boomed across the parking lot, carrying clearly to Lily's ears. "We have a warrant to search this car." Lily watched her father comply, moving slowly with his hands still raised. "Officer, I don't understand what this is about," Robert said, his voice shaking slightly. "I just got home from work." "I haven't done anything wrong." Kane's laugh was cold and humorless. "That's what they all say." He motioned to his partner. "Davis, bring Max over here. Let's see what he finds." This was the moment that would change everything, though nobody realized it yet. Lily, with the unfiltered observation skills that only children possess, watched as Officer Kane did something that made her little heart race with confusion and fear. While Davis was retrieving the police dog, Kane quickly glanced around to ensure no one was watching, but he didn't think to look up at the apartment windows above. The corrupt officer reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag containing light powder. With practiced ease, he dropped it near the driver's side door of Robert's car, then used his foot to kick it partially under the vehicle. The entire action took less than 5 seconds, but Lily's young eyes caught every detail. "No," she gasped, pressing harder against the window. "Bad man, don't hurt Daddy." Officer Davis approached with Max, the German shepherd trained in drug detection. But what Lily witnessed next would later prove crucial to her father's case. Kane wasn't just letting the dog naturally search the vehicle. He was deliberately agitating Max, using harsh commands and aggressive gestures that made the animal more violent than necessary. "Search, Max. Find it," Kane commanded, his voice carrying an edge that made even Lily shiver from her window perch. Max approached the car and immediately began barking aggressively near the driver's door, right where Kane had dropped the planted evidence. But Kane wasn't satisfied with just an alert. He wanted a show. Using techniques that violated every police protocol, he commanded Max to become increasingly aggressive. Robert stepped back, alarmed by the dog's violent behavior. "Officer, what's happening? I've never used drugs in my life." "There's some mistake." "Shut up." Kane snarled, his true nature emerging. "The dog doesn't lie, Thompson. unlike you." Kane bent down and discovered the planted evidence, holding up the small bag with theatrical surprise. "Well, well, well. Look what we have here." He turned to his partner with a satisfied smirk. "Davis, looks like Max found something interesting." Officer Davis shifted uncomfortably, his face pale under the streetlights. Lily could see even from her window that he didn't look happy about what was happening. He kept glancing at Kane with an expression she would later learn to recognize as guilt and fear. When Robert protested his innocence more vehemently, insisting the drugs weren't his, Kane made a decision that would ultimately lead to his downfall. "Max, take him down," he commanded, using the attack command instead of the standard restraint. Protocol. The German shepherd launched himself at Robert, who instinctively raised his arms to protect himself. The resisting arrest charge that would later appear in the police report was born from a father's natural instinct to protect himself from an attacking animal. "Stop, please," Robert cried out as Max knocked him to the ground, but Kane allowed the attack to continue far longer than necessary. Lily began crying, her small fists pounding against the window. "Leave Daddy alone! Bad doggy! Bad man!" she screamed, though her voice was lost in the chaos below. Finally, Kane called off the dog and roughly handcuffed Robert, who was bleeding from bite wounds on his arms. "Robert Thompson, you're under arrest for possession of controlled substances and resisting arrest." As they loaded her father into the back of the patrol car, Lily watched Officer Kane high-five his partner with a satisfied grin. But Officer Davis didn't return the celebratory gesture. Instead, he looked up at the apartment building with troubled eyes, as if sensing that someone had witnessed their terrible secret. The police cars drove away, their flashing lights disappearing into the rainy night, leaving behind a traumatized 3-year-old who had just witnessed the destruction of her family through the calculated cruelty of a corrupt police officer. Lily remained at the window long after the cars disappeared, her tears streaming down her cheeks as she clutched her stuffed elephant tighter. She didn't understand words like corruption or evidence planting, but she knew with absolute certainty that the mean policeman had hurt her daddy on purpose, and that the bad thing he found in Daddy's car wasn't really Daddy's at all. In the months to come, adults would dismiss her account as the confused ramblings of a traumatized child. But Lily Thompson had seen the truth, and that truth would eventually set her father free. Attorney Sarah Mitchell's coffee had long gone cold as she sat in her cramped office at the public defender's office, surrounded by towering stacks of case files that seemed to multiply overnight. The fluorescent light above her desk flickered intermittently, casting dancing shadows across the damning evidence spread before her like pieces of a puzzle designed to destroy Robert Thompson's life. She rubbed her tired eyes and reached for her reading glasses, knowing that somewhere in this mountain of paperwork lay either salvation or confirmation of another innocent man's doom. The Thompson case had landed on her desk 3 weeks ago, and from the moment she'd opened the file, Sarah knew she was fighting an uphill battle against overwhelming odds. The evidence was devastating in its completeness. Robert Thompson had been caught red-handed with 2 ounces of cocaine in his possession, according to the police report. Officer Kane's testimony was crystal clear and unwavering. The drug detection dog had alerted to Thompson's vehicle. A search had revealed the narcotics, and when confronted, Thompson had violently resisted arrest, requiring the use of force to subdue him. Sarah had seen hundreds of similar cases during her 12 years as a public defender. The formula was always the same. Suspect claims innocence, police provide evidence, jury convicts, defendant goes to prison. The system moved with mechanical efficiency, grinding through case after case with little regard for individual circumstances or protestations of innocence. But something about this particular case gnawed at her, creating an uncomfortable itch she couldn't quite scratch. The photographs from the arrest scene told their own story. Robert Thompson's booking photo showed a man who looked more bewildered than guilty. His face bearing the distinctive marks of dog bites, and his eyes reflecting genuine confusion, rather than the hardened defiance she typically saw in career criminals. The medical report documented severe lacerations on both arms, injuries that seemed excessive for a standard arrest procedure. When Sarah had questioned the use of force, Officer Kane had simply stated that Thompson had violently resisted, and the dog had been necessary to ensure officer safety. But the most troubling aspect of the case wasn't what was in the police report. It was what wasn't there. Officer Kane's body camera had mysteriously malfunctioned during the crucial moments of the arrest, capturing only the aftermath. His partner, Officer Davis, had provided corroborating testimony, but Sarah noticed subtle inconsistencies in his written statement. Davis claimed to have been present during the entire arrest, yet his account lacked the specific details that Kane's report contained. It was as if Davis had been describing events he'd heard about secondhand rather than witnessed firsthand. During her first meeting with Robert Thompson at the county jail, Sarah had prepared herself for the usual protestations of innocence that every defendant offered. Instead, she found herself face to face with a man whose desperation felt genuine, and whose story remained consistent despite repeated questioning. Thompson worked as a night shift warehouse supervisor, had no criminal record, no history of drug use, and had never even received so much as a traffic ticket. His drug test from the night of arrest had come back negative, a fact that the prosecution dismissed by claiming he simply hadn't used recently. "Ms. Mitchell," Robert had said during their second meeting, his voice hoarse with emotion, "I know how this looks. I know what the evidence says. But I swear on my daughter's life that I've never seen those drugs before in my life. Officer Kane planted them. I watched him do it. But who's going to believe me over a decorated police officer?" The decorated police officer in question was indeed impressive on paper. Officer Kane had received multiple commendations during his 8-year career, including recognition for drug seizures and community service. His personnel file was spotless, and he was scheduled to receive a promotion to sergeant within the year. On the surface, he appeared to be exactly the kind of officer the department wanted representing them in court. But Sarah had learned to look beneath surfaces, and what she found when she dug deeper into Kane's arrest record was troubling. Over the past 2 years, Kane had been involved in an unusually high number of drug arrests, many of them involving suspects with no prior criminal history. The pattern was subtle but consistent: lone arrests, malfunctioning equipment, suspects who claimed evidence had been planted, and overwhelming physical evidence that made convictions almost guaranteed. The breakthrough in Sarah's understanding came during her third visit with Robert's wife, Jennifer. The young mother had brought along their 3-year-old daughter, Lily, when her babysitter had canceled at the last minute. While Sarah and Jennifer discussed the case, Lily had quietly played in the corner with a set of toy cars and action figures that Jennifer had brought to keep her occupied. "Lily saw everything," Jennifer said, her voice breaking slightly. "She was at the window when they arrested Robert. She's been having nightmares ever since, talking about the mean policeman and how he put bad things in Daddy's car. But she's just a baby. No one will listen to her." Sarah glanced over at Lily, who was arranging her toys in what appeared to be a reenactment of some sort. The little girl had positioned a toy car in the center of her play area and was moving action figures around it with deliberate precision. As Sarah watched, Lily picked up one of the figures and made it drop a tiny object near the toy car, then made the same figure discover the object with exaggerated surprise. "Bad man put it there," Lily said matter-of-factly, not realizing that the adults were listening. Then he said, "Look what I found. But Daddy didn't put it there. Bad man did." The child's innocent recreation sent chills down Sarah's spine. Lily was too young to understand concepts like evidence planting or police corruption, yet she was describing exactly what her father claimed had happened. Sarah knelt down beside the little girl, her legal mind racing with possibilities and obstacles. "Lily, can you tell me about the doggy?" Sarah asked gently. The child's face immediately darkened with fear. "Bad doggy hurt Daddy. Mean man made doggy bite Daddy when Daddy said, 'That's not mine.' Daddy was telling the truth, but mean man didn't listen." Jennifer wiped tears from her eyes. She's been consistent in her story for months. Every time she plays with her toys, she acts out the same scene. She draws pictures of police cars and dogs, always with angry faces. But she's 3 years old. What court would ever allow her to testify? Sarah knew Jennifer was right. Children under the age of 5 were rarely considered competent witnesses in criminal proceedings. Their testimony was deemed unreliable due to their limited vocabulary, susceptibility to suggestion, and inability to distinguish between reality and imagination. The legal system was designed to protect children from the trauma of courtroom proceedings, but in this case, that protection might be preventing the truth from emerging. Over the following days, Sarah found herself obsessed with Lily's account. She researched case law involving child witnesses and consulted with child psychologists about the reliability of testimony from very young children. What she learned was both encouraging and daunting. While children Lily's age could indeed be unreliable witnesses, they were also remarkably accurate when recounting traumatic events they had personally observed, especially when their accounts remained consistent. Over time, the problem was getting a court to consider such testimony. Sarah would need to prove that Lily was competent to testify, that her account was reliable, and that her testimony was crucial to her father's defense. It would be an uphill battle against legal precedent, prosecutorial opposition, and a system that prioritized adult testimony over children's observations. But as Sarah looked at the evidence again with fresh eyes, she realized that Lily Thompson might be the key to exposing a corruption that ran deeper than anyone suspected. The 3-year-old had witnessed something that could change everything. If only Sarah could find a way to make the legal system listen to the truth spoken by the smallest voice in the room. The Pierce County Jail's visiting room smelled of industrial disinfectant and desperation, a combination that had become sickeningly familiar to Sarah Mitchell over the years. The harsh fluorescent lighting cast an unforgiving glare over the plastic chairs and metal tables where families tried to maintain connections through bulletproof glass and monitored phone calls. Sarah had requested a private consultation room for her meeting with Robert Thompson, but the facility was overcrowded, leaving her to conduct sensitive legal discussions in the general visiting area. Jennifer Thompson sat beside Sarah, fidgeting nervously with the clasp of her purse, while 3-year-old Lily swung her legs from a chair that was far too big for her small frame. The little girl clutched a worn stuffed elephant to her chest, her wide eyes taking in the intimidating surroundings, with the fearless curiosity that only young children possessed. Sarah had asked Jennifer to bring Lily to this meeting for a specific reason, though she wasn't entirely sure what she hoped to accomplish. "I've been thinking about what you said last week," Sarah began, keeping her voice low to avoid the attention of nearby families. "About Lily seeing everything that happened the night of Robert's arrest. I know it sounds unconventional, but I'd like to hear her story again, in her own words, without any prompting from adults." Jennifer glanced around the crowded room nervously. "Sarah, she's just a baby. She gets scared talking about that night. And what good would it do anyway? No court is going to listen to a 3-year-old. Before Sarah could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. 2 correctional officers were entering with a German Shepherd, part of the facility's routine drug detection sweep. The moment Lily spotted the dog, her entire demeanor changed dramatically. The stuffed elephant fell from her grasp as she let out a piercing scream that echoed throughout the visiting room. "No, bad doggy, bad doggy," Lily shrieked, scrambling to climb into her mother's lap while pointing frantically at the police dog. "Make it go away. It's going to hurt Daddy again." The entire visiting room fell silent, with dozens of eyes turning toward their table. Jennifer wrapped her arms around her daughter, trying to calm the hysterical child. But Lily continued screaming and thrashing as if she were reliving a nightmare. The correctional officers with the dog quickly moved their search to another section of the facility, but the damage was done. Lily was completely inconsolable. "It's okay, baby," Jennifer whispered, rocking her daughter back and forth. "The doggy isn't going to hurt anyone. Daddy's safe." But Lily wasn't listening to reason. Through her tears, she began babbling rapidly, her words tumbling over each other in a torrent of traumatic memory. "Mean man made doggy bite Daddy. Daddy said, 'That's not mine.' But mean man didn't listen. Bad doggy hurt Daddy when he was being good." Sarah leaned forward, her pulse quickening as she listened to the child's account. This wasn't the confused rambling of a frightened toddler. This was a consistent, detailed recollection that matched exactly what Robert had claimed happened during his arrest. More importantly, Lily's reaction to the police dog revealed something crucial that Sarah had missed before. The child wasn't afraid of dogs in general. She was specifically terrified of police dogs because of what she had witnessed. "Jennifer," Sarah said urgently, "I need you to think carefully. Has Lily been around other dogs since Robert's arrest? Regular dogs, not police dogs?" Jennifer wiped her daughter's tears while considering the question. "Yes, several times. My sister has a golden retriever that Lily loves to play with. Mrs. Peterson next door has a beagle that Lily feeds treats to through the fence. She's never been afraid of regular dogs, only police dogs." This revelation hit Sarah like a bolt of lightning. If Lily could distinguish between regular dogs and police dogs in her fear response, it suggested that her memory of the arrest was far more specific and accurate than anyone had realized. The child wasn't just traumatized by the general chaos of her father's arrest. She was specifically remembering the role that the police dog had played in the violence she witnessed. As Lily began to calm down, Sarah knelt beside the little girl's chair, speaking in the gentlest voice she could manage. "Lily, I know that was scary seeing the doggy. Can you tell me about the night when the police came to see Daddy?" Lily looked at Sarah with tear-filled eyes, and glanced at her mother for reassurance. Jennifer nodded encouragingly, and the little girl began to speak in the matter-of-fact way that children often discuss traumatic events, as if they were describing a movie they had watched. "I was looking out the window because of the loud noise," Lily began, her voice still shaky but determined. "Daddy was by his car, and there were policemen with flashy lights. The mean policeman with the scary face came and talked to Daddy real mean." Sarah felt her heart racing, but kept her expression calm and encouraging. "What did the mean policeman look like, Lily?" The child's description was remarkably detailed for someone her age. He had a red, angry face and a shiny tooth that sparkled when he smiled mean. He was bigger than Daddy, and he walked like this. Lily demonstrated a swagger that perfectly matched Officer Kane's cocky demeanor. "Then what happened?" Sarah asked gently. "The mean man looked around to see if anyone was watching, but he didn't look up at my window. He put his hand in his jacket and took out a little bag with white stuff in it. He dropped it by Daddy's car, then kicked it under with his foot." Jennifer gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. This level of detail was far beyond what they had heard from Lily before. The child was describing specific actions that, if true, would prove evidence tempering beyond any doubt. Lily continued her account with the unflinching honesty that only children possessed. "Then the mean man called the doggy over. The doggy found the bag right where the mean man put it, and the mean man pretended to be surprised. He said, "Look what I found," but I saw him put it there. What happened when Daddy tried to talk to the policeman? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. Lily's face crumpled with remembered fear. Daddy said, "That's not mine. I never seen that before," but the mean man got really angry. He told the doggy to attack Daddy, and the doggy jumped on him and bit him on his arms. Daddy was crying and asking them to stop, but they didn't stop until Daddy was bleeding and couldn't fight anymore. The visiting room around them seemed to fade away as Sarah absorbed the full impact of what she was hearing. This wasn't just witness testimony. This was a complete deconstruction of Officer Kane's official report. Every detail Lily provided contradicted the police version of events, from the evidence planting to the unnecessary use of force. There was another policeman there too, Lily added, as if reading Sarah's thoughts. He didn't look happy about what the mean man was doing. He kept looking around like he wanted to leave, and when the mean man was hurting Daddy, the other policeman looked sad and scared. Sarah realized that Lily was describing Officer Davis, Kane's partner, who had provided corroborating testimony. If the child's account was accurate, Davis hadn't been a willing participant in the evidence planting. He had been a reluctant witness who was too afraid or intimidated to speak up. As they prepared to leave the jail, Sarah's mind was racing with possibilities and challenges. Lily's account was incredibly detailed and consistent, but getting a court to accept testimony from a 3-year-old would require overcoming centuries of legal precedent. She would need expert witnesses, psychological evaluations, and ironclad proof that the child's memory was reliable. But for the first time since taking Robert Thompson's case, Sarah felt a spark of genuine hope. Hidden in the mind of a traumatized 3-year-old was the key to exposing police corruption and freeing an innocent man. The question was whether the legal system would be brave enough to listen to the truth when it came from the smallest voice. In the room, the real work was just beginning, but Sarah Mitchell had found her smoking gun, and it spoke with the innocent honesty of a child who had seen too much. The rain drummed against the windows of Sarah Mitchell's home office as she spread dozens of files across her dining room table, transforming the space into a makeshift war room. It was past midnight, but sleep was impossible when she knew an innocent man was rotting in jail while a corrupt police officer walked free. Empty coffee cups and takeout containers littered the table alongside police reports, court transcripts, and psychological evaluations. Sarah had spent her own money to hire private investigator Marcus Rodriguez, a former detective who specialized in police misconduct cases, and the information he'd uncovered over the past week was explosive. "You need to see this," Marcus said when he'd arrived that evening, his weathered face grim with the weight of what he'd discovered. He placed a thick manila folder on the table with the reverence of someone handling evidence that could destroy lives or save them. "Officer, Kane's record is dirtier than a politician's campaign promises." Sarah opened the folder to reveal a meticulously documented timeline of Kane's arrests over the past 3 years. What she saw made her blood run cold. Kane hadn't just made a few questionable arrests. He had orchestrated a systematic campaign of evidence planting that had destroyed dozens of innocent lives. The pattern was so consistent, it was almost like a signature. Lone arrests in poorly lit areas, malfunctioning body cameras, suspects with no prior criminal history, and the same drug detection dog used in every case. "Look at this," Marcus said, pointing to a series of highlighted entries. James Morelli, arrested 18 months ago. No criminal record, worked as a school janitor, claimed Kane planted cocaine in his locker. Convicted, sentenced to 5 years. Maria Santos, single mother of 2, arrested last year when Kane found heroin in her purse during a traffic stop. She swore it wasn't hers. Convicted, lost custody of her kids. Sarah felt sick as she read through case after case of people whose lives had been destroyed by Kane's corruption. The victims were predominantly minorities and working-class individuals who couldn't afford high-powered legal representation, people the system was designed to fail. "How many are there?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "At least 37 cases I can document," Marcus replied. "Probably more, but these are the ones where Kane was the primary arresting officer, and the evidence was narcotics found during searches. The conviction rate is 100%. That's statistically impossible unless something's very wrong. But the most damning evidence was yet to come." Marcus pulled out a veterinary file that made Sarah's hands shake as she read it. "This is Max's medical record," he explained. "Kane's canine partner. The dog has been treated multiple times for anxiety, aggressive behavior, and stress-related disorders. According to Dr. Patricia Vance, the veterinarian, Max was being trained using illegal methods that violated every police protocol. The veterinary records painted a picture of systematic animal abuse designed to create a weapon rather than a detection tool. Max had been subjected to aggression training that turned him from a drug detection dog into an attack animal. Dr. Vance's notes indicated she had reported her concerns to the police department's K-9 unit supervisor, but her complaints had been ignored or buried in bureaucratic red tape. "There's more," Marcus continued, pulling out another set of documents. "I managed to track down Officer Davis, Kane's partner. He wouldn't talk to me directly, but I spoke to his wife. She says Davis has been drinking heavily since Robert Thompson's arrest, having nightmares and talking about quitting the force. She mentioned that he's been seeing a department therapist about ethical conflicts in the workplace." Sarah's pulse quickened. If Davis was experiencing psychological distress over his role in Kane's corruption, he might be willing to testify against his partner in exchange for immunity. The key would be approaching him in a way that made cooperation seem like redemption rather than betrayal. The breakthrough came when Marcus presented his most significant finding. "I've been analyzing the arrest locations," he said, spreading out a map of the city with red pins marking each of Kane's drug arrests. "Look at the pattern." Sarah studied the map and immediately saw what Marcus meant. The arrests weren't random. They formed distinct clusters around areas where Kane had specific knowledge or access. Several arrests had occurred near warehouses where the suspects worked, others near apartment complexes where Kane had previously responded to calls, and a disturbing number near schools and community centers. "He's been stalking these people," Sarah realized with horror, "learning their routines, their vehicles, their habits, then setting them up when he knows they'll be alone and vulnerable." Marcus nodded grimly. "And there's something else." I cross-referenced Kane's arrest dates with his work schedule and found something interesting. Every single planted evidence, ARREST, occurred during shifts when his supervisor was off-duty and when minimal backup was available. He was deliberately choosing moments when he could operate without oversight. But the most shocking revelation was saved for last. Marcus produced a series of financial records that he'd obtained through a contact in the district attorney's office. "Kane's been receiving bonuses for drug seizures," he explained. "The department has a policy of rewarding officers for successful narcotics arrests. Kane has received over $50,000 in performance bonuses over the past 3 years. Sarah stared at the financial records in disbelief. Kane wasn't just a corrupt cop. He was a man who had turned evidence planting into a profitable business model. Every innocent person he framed earned him both money and career advancement, creating a powerful incentive to continue his crimes. The investigation took an even more disturbing turn when Marcus revealed his final discovery. "I found 3 other officers who requested transfers away from Kane's unit in the past 2 years, he said. When I spoke to them off the record, they all mentioned ethical concerns and uncomfortable situations. They wouldn't go into details, but it's clear Kane's corruption was an open secret in the department. Sarah felt the full weight of systemic corruption pressing down on her. This wasn't just about one bad cop. It was about an entire department that had either enabled Kane's crimes or been too cowardly to stop them. The blue wall of silence had protected a predator who destroyed innocent lives for personal profit. "There's one more thing," Marcus said quietly. "I managed to get a copy of the incident report from Thompson's arrest." Davis wrote his portion, separately from Kane's, which is unusual. Reading between the lines, his account is subtly different. He describes being surprised by the dog's discovery and mentions that Thompson appeared genuinely confused by the arrest. Sarah recognized the significance immediately. Davis's report contained coded language that suggested he knew something was wrong, but didn't have the courage to speak up directly. It was the crack in the wall that she needed to bring down Kane's house of lies. As dawn broke over the city, Sarah finally allowed herself to feel cautiously optimistic. She had the evidence to prove Kane's corruption, expert witnesses to explain the pattern of abuse, and potential testimony from his former partner. Most importantly, she had Lily Thompson, a 3-year-old witness whose innocent honesty could expose the truth that an entire police department had tried to hide. The real battle was just beginning, but Sarah Mitchell now had the ammunition she needed to fight for justice. The question was whether the system would be brave enough to acknowledge that sometimes the most powerful testimony comes from the smallest voices. The mahogany-paneled chambers of Judge Margaret Foster felt more like a battlefield than a place of justice, as Sarah Mitchell prepared to wage the most important legal fight of her career. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny witnesses to the drama about to unfold. Judge Foster, a stern woman in her late 50s with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, reviewed the motion papers with the methodical precision that had earned her a reputation as one of the most fair but demanding judges in the county. Across the room, District Attorney Michael Wright adjusted his expensive silk tie and checked his Rolex with the confidence of a man who rarely lost cases. Wright was known throughout the legal community as a ruthless prosecutor who viewed every trial as a personal referendum on his competence. His perfectly tailored suit and polished shoes reflected his ambition. He had his sights set on the Attorney General's office, and high-profile convictions were the stepping stones to political advancement. "Ms. Mitchell," Judge Foster began, her voice carrying the authority of 2 decades on the bench, "your motion to allow testimony from a 3-year-old witness is highly unusual. I've reviewed the case law you've cited, and while there are precedents for child witnesses, I cannot find a single case where a child this young was permitted to testify in a criminal proceeding of this magnitude." Sarah rose from her chair, her heart pounding but her voice steady. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, consulting with child psychologists, researching legal precedents, and crafting arguments that could convince a skeptical court to listen to truth from the mouth of a toddler. "Your Honor, I understand the unusual nature of this request, but the circumstances of this case are equally extraordinary." She approached the bench with a thick folder containing Lily's drawings, psychological evaluations, and transcripts of her consistent accounts. Lily Thompson has provided detailed, unwavering testimony about what she witnessed on the night of her father's arrest. Her account has remained consistent across multiple interviews with different professionals over a period of 8 months. Child psychologist Dr. Elena Rodriguez has evaluated Lily extensively and determined that she possesses exceptional memory recall for traumatic events. District Attorney Wright shot to his feet with theatrical indignation. "Your Honor, this is preposterous. We cannot base criminal proceedings on the fantasy ramblings of a toddler who probably can't even tie her own shoes, let alone distinguish between reality and imagination." The defense is asking this court to overturn centuries of legal precedent, based on the word of a child who still believes in Santa Claus. Judge Foster raised her hand for silence, but Sarah could see the skepticism in her eyes. The legal system was built on precedent and procedure, not on taking leaps of faith based on the testimony of preschoolers. Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Wright raises valid concerns about the reliability of such young testimony. What makes you believe that Lily Thompson's account is sufficiently credible to warrant consideration? Sarah had anticipated this challenge and was prepared with a most compelling argument. Your Honor, I'd like to call Dr. Elena Rodriguez to explain her findings. Dr. Rodriguez entered the chamber with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent 20 years studying child psychology and trauma. A petite woman in her early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, she carried herself with the authority that came from being recognized as one of the nation's leading experts on child witness testimony. Dr. Rodriguez, Sarah began, you've evaluated Lily Thompson extensively. In your professional opinion, is she competent to provide reliable testimony about events she witnessed? Dr. Rodriguez consulted her notes before responding. Your Honor, while children Lily's age are generally considered unreliable witnesses, there are specific circumstances where very young children can provide remarkably accurate testimony. Lily exhibits several factors that increase reliability: the traumatic nature of the event she witnessed, the consistency of her account over time, her ability to distinguish between different uniformed officers, and most significantly, her detailed knowledge of specific facts that she could only have learned through direct observation. Wright jumped up again, his face flushed with frustration. Objection, Your Honor. This is nothing more than junk science dressed up as expert testimony. Children this age are notoriously susceptible to suggestion and fantasy. How can we possibly trust the word of someone who hasn't even started kindergarten? But Dr. Rodriguez was prepared for this attack. Mr. Wright, your concerns would be valid if Lily's account were vague, or if it had changed over time. However, her testimony includes specific details that demonstrate genuine observation rather than fantasy, or suggestion. She accurately described Officer Kane's distinctive gold tooth, his specific uniform details, and the sequence of events that match physical evidence from the scene. Most compelling is her consistent description of evidence planting, a concept far too sophisticated for a 3-year-old to invent or understand without having witnessed it directly. Judge Foster leaned forward, clearly intrigued despite her reservations. Dr. Rodriguez, are you saying that Lily Thompson's testimony could be considered reliable despite her age? Your Honor, I'm saying that the combination of factors in this case, the traumatic nature of the event, Lily's specific and consistent details, and her demonstrated ability to distinguish between different aspects of what she witnessed, creates circumstances where her testimony deserves serious consideration. Children don't lie about trauma they've experienced, especially when their accounts remain consistent over extended periods. Sarah seized the moment to present her most powerful evidence. Your Honor, I'd like to demonstrate something that Dr. Rodriguez discovered during our evaluation of Lily. She gestured to Jennifer Thompson, who had been waiting in the hallway with her daughter. When Lily entered the judge's chambers, she immediately noticed Wright's expensive suit and confident posture. Without any prompting from the adults, she pointed at the prosecutor and said, "He looks like the mean policeman. Sane, angry face and big body." Then, looking around the room, she spotted Judge Foster's gavel on the desk and added, "That's like what the mean man used to point at Daddy's car." The room fell silent. Lily had just demonstrated her ability to make specific associations and recall detailed observations without any coaching or suggestion from adults. Wright's confident demeanor visibly deflated as he realized the child had just compared him to the corrupt officer, an association that spoke to her genuine ability to remember and identify threatening authority figures. Judge Foster studied Lily carefully as Dr. Rodriguez gently asked the child to describe what she remembered about the night the police came to see Daddy. Without hesitation, Lily launched into the same detailed account she had given multiple times before, using her own vocabulary to describe complex concepts like evidence planting and police misconduct. The mean policeman looked around to make sure nobody was watching, but he didn't see me in my window, Lily said with the matter-of-fact tone that children use to describe the most extraordinary events. He took a little white bag from his jacket and dropped it by Daddy's car, then kicked it under with his foot. When the doggy found it, he pretended to be surprised and said, "Look what I found." But I saw him put it there first. Wright made one final desperate attempt to discredit the testimony. "Your Honor, even if we accept that this child has a vivid imagination, we cannot possibly allow her to testify in open court. The trauma of facing a jury, cross-examination, and the intimidating courthouse environment would be devastating to someone so young." Sarah was ready for this objection. "Your Honor, we're not asking Lily to endure traditional testimony. Dr. Rodriguez has developed a protocol using play, therapy, and demonstration that would allow Lily to show what she witnessed in a controlled, child-friendly environment. The jury would observe her demonstration via video feed, eliminating the trauma of direct courtroom exposure while preserving the integrity of her testimony. After 2 hours of arguments, expert testimony, and legal precedent citations, Judge Foster announced her decision. This court recognizes the unusual nature of this case and the unprecedented request to consider testimony from such a young witness. However, the combination of Dr. Rodriguez's expert evaluation, the consistency of the child's account, and the specific details that suggest genuine observation rather than fantasy compel me to allow a controlled presentation of Lily Thompson's testimony. Wright's face went pale as the implications sank in. His seemingly slam-dunk case had just developed a massive crack, and that crack was shaped like a 3-year-old's honest recollection of police corruption. Judge Foster continued, "The court will allow Lily Thompson to demonstrate her account of the events through play therapy, observed by the jury via closed-circuit television. Dr. Rodriguez will facilitate the demonstration, and both counsel will be present to ensure fairness and protect the child's well-being." As they left the courthouse that day, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She had won the right for Lily to be heard, but now she had to prepare a 3-year-old to expose corruption that could destroy careers and potentially put their lives in danger. The real battle was just beginning, but for the first time in months, Sarah Mitchell believed that justice might actually be possible. The Pierce County Courthouse had never seen anything like it. By 7 in the morning, 3 hours before the scheduled proceedings, news vans lined the street like an army preparing for battle. Reporters from local stations, national networks, and legal blogs crowded the courthouse steps, their cameras and microphones creating a forest of media attention that transformed the normally quiet judicial building into the epicenter of a national conversation about justice, corruption, and the power of innocent truth. Inside courtroom 3A, Judge Margaret Foster surveyed the packed gallery with a mixture of concern and determination. Every seat was filled with a mixture of legal observers, journalists, police officers, and community activists who had heard about the unprecedented case where a 3-year-old would testify against police corruption. The air hummed with nervous energy and whispered speculation about what was about to unfold. Sarah Mitchell sat at the defense table, her hands trembling slightly as she reviewed her notes one final time. Beside her, Robert Thompson looked both hopeful and terrified. Hopeful that his daughter might finally be believed, terrified that the exposure might traumatize Lily beyond repair. Across the aisle, District Attorney Michael Wright maintained his confident facade, but Sarah could see the tension in his jaw and the way he kept adjusting his tie. His political future was riding on this case, and the presence of so much media attention meant that failure would be very public and very damaging. An especially prepared room adjacent to the courtroom, Dr. Elena Rodriguez made final preparations for what would become one of the most unusual legal proceedings in American history. The room had been transformed into a child-friendly space with soft lighting, comfortable seating, and a carefully arranged collection of toys and props that Lily could use to demonstrate what she had witnessed 8 months earlier. Lily Thompson, now 3.5 years old, sat cross-legged on a colorful carpet, wearing a simple blue dress that her mother had chosen because it was Lily's favorite. The little girl seemed remarkably calm, considering the weight of what rested on her small shoulders. She held her stuffed elephant, the same one she had clutched the night of her father's arrest, and looked up at Dr. Rodriguez with trusting eyes. "Remember, Lily," Dr. Rodriguez said gently, "we're just going to play the same game we've been playing in my office. You're going to show everyone what you saw from your window that night when the police came to see Daddy." 3 large monitors had been installed in the courtroom, allowing the judge, jury, and gallery to observe Lily's demonstration in real time. The closed-circuit system preserved the child's privacy while ensuring that her testimony could be properly evaluated by the legal professionals who would determine her father's fate. Judge Foster called the court to order, and the packed courtroom fell silent with an expectancy that was almost electric. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "what you are about to witness is unprecedented in this jurisdiction's legal history. A young child will be demonstrating her recollection of events through play therapy, facilitated by Dr. Rodriguez. I remind everyone that this testimony deserves the same respect and attention as any adult witness." On the monitors, the courtroom watched as Dr. Rodriguez began the session. "Lily, can you show me what you saw from your window the night the police came?" Without hesitation, Lily reached for a dollhouse that had been arranged to replicate the Thompson family's apartment complex. She positioned herself at the miniature window on the second floor, then looked down at the parking area where toy cars and action figures were scattered. Her small hands moved with surprising precision as she began to recreate the scene that had haunted her dreams for months. "I was looking out because there were loud noises and bright lights," Lily began, her voice clear and steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing. Daddy was standing by his silver car with his hands up like this. She positioned a toy figure next to a small silver car, raising its arms above its head in perfect imitation of surrender. The courtroom remained absolutely silent as Lily continued her demonstration. She picked up an action figure wearing a police uniform and gave it a stern, angry expression that somehow perfectly captured the menacing presence that Officer Kane had projected that night. The mean policeman looked around to make sure nobody was watching him, Lily said, moving the police figure's head from side to side in an exaggerated scanning motion. "But he didn't think to look up at my window where I was watching." What happened next sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Lily made the police figure reach into its jacket pocket and pull out a tiny white object, a small piece of clay that Dr. Rodriguez had shaped to represent a bag of drugs. The little girl then demonstrated how Kane had dropped the evidence near the toy car, using the figure's foot to kick it partially underneath the vehicle. "He put the bad thing by Daddy's car and then pretended he didn't do it," Lily explained matter-of-factly, as if she were describing the most ordinary event in the world. "Then he called the doggy over to find it." District Attorney Wright shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Lily introduced a toy German Shepherd to her demonstration. The child's recreation of the dog's behavior was chillingly accurate. She showed how Kane had deliberately agitated the animal, using harsh commands and aggressive gestures that violated every protocol for canine handling. But the most powerful, Moment came when Lily began to demonstrate her father's reaction to the planted evidence. Using the Robert Thompson figure, she showed how he had protested his innocence, his voice rising with genuine confusion and fear. Daddy said, "That's not mine. I never seen that before." Lily recounted, making the toy figure gesture frantically at the planted evidence. But the mean policeman got really angry, and his face turned red like when Mommy burns the pancakes. The jury was transfixed as Lily continued her testimony. Several jurors leaned forward in their seats, hanging on every word from the small child, whose innocent honesty was more compelling than any adult witness they had ever heard. Judge Foster found herself fighting back tears as she watched this brave little girl expose corruption with the fearless truth that only children possess. Lily's demonstration of the actual arrest was difficult to watch. She showed how Cain had commanded Max to attack Robert, not just alert to the presence of drugs. The child's recreation of her father's terror and pain was heartbreaking. She made the Robert figure cry out for help, while the dog figure knocked it to the ground. The doggy bit Daddy on his arms, and Daddy was bleeding and crying. Lily said, her voice beginning to waver with emotion as she relived the trauma. "I was screaming from my window for them to stop hurting Daddy, but they couldn't hear me because there was too much noise." Officer Cain, who had been sitting in the gallery with forced confidence, was now visibly sweating. His face had gone pale, and several observers noticed that his hands were shaking. The detailed accuracy of Lily's account was stripping away. His carefully constructed lies layer by layer, exposing the corrupt reality underneath. The climax of Lily's testimony came when she demonstrated Cain's reaction after the arrest. When they put Daddy in the police car, the mean man was happy, she said, making the Cain figure smile and give a thumbs-up gesture. He hit hands with the other policeman like they do on TV when someone scores a goal. Sarah Mitchell felt her heart soar as she realized that Lily had just described the high-five celebration that Cain and Davis had shared. A detail that had never appeared in any police report, but perfectly captured the callous satisfaction of corrupt officers who had just destroyed an innocent man's life. Dr. Rodriguez gently concluded the session by asking Lily if there was anything else she remembered about that night. The little girl thought for a moment, then added one final devastating detail. The other policeman, not the mean one, he looked sad when they were hurting Daddy. He kept looking up at the building, like he knew someone was watching, and he didn't want them to see. As the monitors went dark and the courtroom slowly absorbed what they had just witnessed, Sarah knew that everything had changed. A 3-year-old child had just delivered the most powerful testimony in the history of police corruption cases. The truth, spoken with innocent honesty, had the power to bring down an entire system of lies. A silence that followed Lily's testimony was deafening, a cathedral-like hush that seemed to press against the courtroom walls with the weight of revealed truth. Judge Margaret Foster surveyed the packed gallery, where seasoned police officers sat with ashen faces, reporters scribbled frantically in their notebooks, and community activists wiped tears from their eyes. The 3-year-old's innocent honesty had accomplished what years of internal affairs, investigations, and citizen complaints had failed to achieve. She had stripped away the blue wall of silence and exposed corruption in its rawest form. District Attorney Michael Wright rose slowly from his chair, his usual prosecutorial confidence replaced by the desperate demeanor of a man watching his political career crumble in real time. The media attention he had once craved was now a spotlight, illuminating his failure to properly investigate the case. His expensive suit, normally a symbol of his success, now felt like a costume in a performance that had gone horribly wrong. "Your Honor," Wright began, his voice noticeably less steady than usual, "the prosecution requests a brief recess to reassess our position in light of this new information." Sarah Mitchell stood immediately, sensing blood in the water. "Objection, Your Honor. The prosecution has had months to investigate this case thoroughly. The only new information is that they finally listened to a witness they chose to dismiss because of her age. Judge Foster nodded grimly. Mr. Wright, your office had access to the same witness statements and evidence that the defense presented. The court will not grant a recess to allow you to reconstruct your case now that it's been exposed as fundamentally flawed. The judge's rebuke sent murmurs rippling through the gallery. Legal observers recognized this as a judicial criticism that would haunt Wright's career for years to come. The prosecutor had built his reputation on thoroughness and attention to detail, but Lily's testimony had revealed that he had failed to investigate the most basic elements of police corruption. The court calls Officer Derek Kane to the stand, Judge Foster announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had presided over thousands of cases, but never one quite like this. Officer Kane rose from his seat in the gallery, his uniform crisp and his posture military straight, but those familiar with reading body language could see the subtle signs of a man under extreme stress. His jaw was clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the courtroom's air conditioning, and his normally steady hands trembled slightly as he approached the witness stand. Sarah had waited months for this moment. The chance to confront the corrupt officer who had destroyed her client's life for personal gain. She had prepared meticulously, studying Kane's psychological profile, his arrest patterns, and most importantly, every inconsistency in his official reports. Officer Kane, Sarah began, her voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. You testified earlier that Mr. Thompson was in possession of cocaine when you arrested him. Is that correct? Kane's response was automatic, rehearsed from months of sticking to his fabricated story. Yes, that's correct. My K-9 partner, Max, alerted to the presence of narcotics in the defendant's vehicle, and upon searching, I discovered approximately 2 ounces of cocaine. Sarah moved closer to the witness stand, her eyes never leaving Kane's face. And you testified that Mr. Thompson became violent when confronted with this evidence, requiring the use of force to subdue him. That's correct, Kane replied. But his voice lacked the conviction it had carried during his original testimony. Lily's detailed account had planted seeds of doubt that were now growing into full-blown anxiety. Sarah walked to the evidence table and picked up the veterinary records that Marcus Rodriguez had uncovered. Officer Kane, are you familiar with the proper protocols for canine handling during drug detection operations? Kane's attorney, a nervous-looking public defender named Tom Bradley, who had drawn the short straw of representing a corrupt cop, started to object, but then seemed to realize that any objection would only draw more attention to his client's irregular training methods. Yes, I'm familiar with the protocols, Kane answered cautiously. Sarah opened the veterinary file with deliberate theatricality. Then you're aware that using aggressive commands and physical intimidation to agitate a detection dog violates both department policy and state law regarding animal welfare? The color drained from Kane's face. He hadn't expected the defense to uncover Max's medical records, and certainly hadn't anticipated that his illegal training methods would be exposed in open court. I follow all department protocols, he stammered. Do you? Sarah pressed. Because Dr. Patricia Vance, Max's veterinarian, has documented multiple instances of anxiety disorders, stress-related injuries, and behavioral problems consistent with aggressive training methods. Methods that turn a detection dog into an attack animal. Kane's composure began to crack visibly. I don't know what you're talking about. Max was properly trained according to department standards. Sarah produced a photograph from the veterinary file showing Max's injuries from excessive training. The image was disturbing enough to cause several jury members to gasp audibly. Officer Kane, can you explain why your canine partner required medical treatment for bite wounds, stress fractures, and severe anxiety if he was being trained according to proper protocols? The corrupt officer's lawyer finally found his voice. Objection, Your Honor. This line of questioning is irrelevant to the charges against Mr. Thompson. Judge Foster overruled the objection with obvious satisfaction. The training and behavior of the police dog that allegedly detected evidence is entirely relevant to this case. Officer Kane will answer the question. Kane's response was barely audible. Dogs get injured during training. It's normal. Sarah moved in for the kill. Officer Kane, did you plant cocaine in Robert Thompson's vehicle on the night of his arrest? The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Kane's eyes darted around the courtroom, seeking an escape route that didn't exist. No. Absolutely not. That's a ridiculous accusation. But Sarah wasn't finished. She approached the bench and requested permission to present new evidence. Your Honor, during our investigation, we discovered something that Officer Kane's report failed to mention. She produced a tablet showing security camera footage from a neighboring apartment building. The video was grainy and distant, but it clearly showed a figure in police uniform making suspicious movements near Robert's vehicle before the official search began. Kane's eyes widened as he recognized the damning footage. His carefully constructed lies were collapsing like a house of cards, and everyone in the courtroom could see his growing panic. Officer Kane, Sarah continued relentlessly, this footage shows you dropping something near Mr. Thompson's vehicle approximately 90 seconds before you officially discovered the cocaine. Can you explain this discrepancy? Kane's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The weight of evidence was crushing him, and the presence of cameras broadcasting his humiliation to the entire region made his situation even more unbearable. At that moment, something unprecedented happened. Officer Davis, Kane's partner, who had remained silent throughout the proceedings, suddenly stood up in the gallery. Your Honor, Davis called out, his voice cracking with emotion. I need to tell the truth. The courtroom erupted in surprised murmurs as Davis approached the bench without permission. Judge Foster should have held him in contempt, but the dramatic moment seemed to call for extraordinary measures. Officer Davis, the judge said carefully, you're not scheduled to testify today. Davis's face was streaked with tears as he faced the court. I can't stay quiet anymore. Officer Kane did plant that evidence. I watched him do it, and I've watched him destroy dozens of innocent lives. I've been carrying this guilt for months, and that little girl's testimony. She's telling the truth about everything. Kane's face went white as his partner's confession sealed his fate. The blue wall of silence that had protected him for years was crumbling, and his fellow officer was now testifying against him. He threatened my family, Davis continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. He said if I ever spoke up about his methods, he'd plant evidence on my wife, my kids. But watching that innocent child describe what he did to her father, I can't be part of this anymore. As Davis's confession echoed through the stunned courtroom, Kane finally broke completely. His composure shattered like glass, and he slumped forward in the witness chair, his head in his hands. It wasn't supposed to go this far, Kane whispered, his voice barely audible. I just needed the arrest numbers for my promotion. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. The admission sent shockwaves through the courtroom. In trying to justify his actions, Kane had just confessed to years of evidence planting and police corruption. His career, his freedom, and his reputation were destroyed in a single moment of weakness. Sarah Mitchell felt a surge of vindication as she realized that a 3-year-old's honest testimony had accomplished what the entire criminal justice system had failed to achieve. Truth, no matter how small the voice that spoke it, had the power to bring down even the most protected corruption. The battle was won, but the war for justice was just beginning. 6 months after Officer Kane's confession echoed through courtroom 3A, Robert Thompson stood in his own kitchen for the first time in over a year. Watching his daughter Lily make pancakes with the focused determination that only a 4-year-old could possess. The morning sun streamed through windows that no longer reminded him of prison bars, and the sounds of normal family life. Jennifer's laughter, Lily's chatter, the sizzle of bacon in the pan, felt like a symphony after months of institutional silence. The legal aftermath of Kane's courtroom breakdown had moved with unprecedented speed. Within hours of his confession, District Attorney Michael Wright had dismissed all charges against Robert Thompson, and by evening, Kane was in custody, facing federal charges for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, perjury, and conspiracy. The FBI had immediately launched a comprehensive investigation into Kane's arrest record, and what they found confirmed Sarah Mitchell's worst suspicions about the scope of his corruption. The Pierce County Police Department's Internal Affairs Division, previously content to ignore complaints about Kane's methods, suddenly found themselves under intense federal scrutiny. Captain Maria Santos, who had been promoted to oversee the department's reform efforts, discovered that Kane's corruption had been an open secret among several supervisors, who had chosen to look the other way in exchange for the impressive arrest statistics that made their unit look successful. 37 innocent people, Sarah had told the packed courthouse steps during her press conference following Kane's arrest. 37 families destroyed by one corrupt officer, and a system that refused to listen when victims tried to tell the truth. It took the honest words of a 3-year-old child to expose what trained investigators had ignored for years. The ripple effects extended far beyond Pierce County. Kane's case became a catalyst for police reform legislation across the state, with Lily's law mandating new protocols for child witness testimony and requiring independent oversight of K-9 units. The legislation also established a victim compensation fund for those wrongfully convicted through police misconduct, funded by seizures from corrupt officers' assets. Officer Davis, whose dramatic confession had sealed Kane's fate, received immunity in exchange for his testimony against his former partner. The psychological toll of his complicity had been devastating. His wife later revealed that he had attempted suicide twice in the months following Thompson's arrest, consumed by guilt over his role in destroying innocent lives. Davis ultimately left law enforcement entirely, becoming a counselor for police officers struggling with ethical conflicts in their departments. The most complex victim of Kane's corruption was Max, a German shepherd whose training had been corrupted into a weapon of false evidence. Animal behaviorist Dr. Jennifer Walsh worked for months to rehabilitate the traumatized dog, slowly undoing years of abusive conditioning that had turned him from a detection animal into an attack machine. The process was heartbreaking. Max would cower whenever he saw a police uniform, his body trembling with conditioned responses to commands that had been used to hurt innocent people. Max was as much a victim as any of Kane's human targets, Dr. Walsh explained to the media. He had been systematically abused and conditioned to respond with violence when his natural instinct was simply to detect and alert. The rehabilitation process required us to essentially rebuild his entire understanding of his role and relationship with humans. The breakthrough in Max's recovery came through an unexpected source, Lily Thompson herself. When Dr. Walsh learned about the little girl who had helped expose Kane's crimes, she arranged for Lily to meet Max during one of his therapy sessions. The meeting was carefully supervised, but what happened surprised everyone involved. Lily approached Max without fear, her small hand extended in friendship. "You're not a bad doggy," she said softly, her voice carrying the simple wisdom that had already changed so many lives. "The mean man made you do bad things, but you're good inside." Max responded to her innocent kindness in a way that months of professional rehabilitation hadn't achieved. His tail wagged tentatively, and for the first time since his rescue, he allowed himself to be petted without flinching. The moment was captured by a photographer and became an iconic image of healing and redemption that appeared on magazine covers across the country. The Thompson family's recovery was slower and more complex. Robert struggled with post-traumatic stress from his wrongful imprisonment, suffering from nightmares and anxiety attacks that required ongoing therapy. The knowledge that his freedom had come at the cost of his daughter's trauma created a complicated mix of gratitude and guilt that would take years to fully process. Jennifer had filed a civil rights lawsuit against the Pierce County Police Department, and the eventual settlement provided financial security for the family's future. But more importantly, it established legal precedents that would protect other families from similar corruption. The settlement included provisions for ongoing police training, independent oversight of K-9 units, and mandatory psychological evaluations for officers with unusual arrest patterns. Lily herself seemed to recover, with the remarkable resilience that children often display in the face of trauma. Her nightmares gradually faded, and she began to trust police officers again after meeting ethical K-9 units who demonstrated positive training methods. Dr. Elena Rodriguez continued to work with her, documenting her recovery for a research study that would influence how the legal system handles child witnesses in the future. The broader impact of Lily's testimony extended throughout the criminal justice system. Law schools began teaching courses on child witness psychology, and police academies incorporated training on recognizing and preventing evidence planting. The case became a landmark example of how corruption could be exposed and justice achieved, when the system finally listened to voices it had previously dismissed. Sarah Mitchell's career was transformed by the case. She was promoted to head the public defender's office, using her newfound influence to establish a special unit dedicated to investigating potential police misconduct. The Thompson Unit, as it became known, reviewed thousands of cases involving questionable arrests and helped exonerate dozens of wrongfully convicted individuals. Kane himself received a 15-year federal sentence for civil rights violations, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. His fall from decorated officer to convicted felon was complete, but the damage he had caused would take generations to fully repair. The families he had destroyed, the communities he had terrorized, and the trust in law enforcement he had shattered would require ongoing effort to heal. On a sunny Saturday morning, exactly 1 year after Kane's conviction, the Thompson family gathered in their backyard for a barbecue celebrating Robert's official exoneration and the expungement of his criminal record. Lily, now a confident 4-year-old who spoke in complete sentences and had started pre-kindergarten, was playing with Max, who had been officially adopted by their family after completing his rehabilitation. "Daddy," Lily asked while petting the gentle dog who had once been used as a weapon against her father, "why do grown-ups sometimes not tell the truth?" Robert considered his daughter's question carefully, understanding that her innocent curiosity deserved an honest answer. "Sometimes, sweetheart, grown-ups make bad choices because they're scared or selfish. But you showed everyone that telling the truth is always the right thing to do, even when it's hard." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across their yard, Sarah Mitchell arrived for the celebration, bringing with her a special guest, Judge Margaret Foster, who had made the unprecedented decision to listen to a toddler's testimony. Judge knelt down to Lily's level, smiling at the little girl who had changed legal history. "Thank you, Lily," Judge Foster said simply. "You reminded all of us that justice isn't about age or authority. It's about truth. And sometimes the most important truths come from the smallest voices." The little girl who had watched corruption from her window, who had spoken truth when adults wouldn't listen, who had brought down a system of lies with nothing but honest words, smiled and went back to playing with her dog. In her world, she had simply told the truth about what she had seen. She couldn't have known that her courage would change everything, creating ripples of justice that would protect countless other families from the corruption she had helped expose. Justice had been served, not through complex legal maneuvering or political influence, but through the simple, powerful honesty of a child who refused to be silenced. And in the end, that was exactly as it should be.